Welcome to the 340 Banter podcast. Today, Michael, Chelsea, and I will be discussing all the opportunities you might have to advance your career within the 340B program, but also there are sometimes challenges and you feel like you're getting pigeonholed into a position. So we'll discuss how you can change that and really grow your career. One of the things that I really like about the 340B program is that it provides opportunities for career advancement. Coming from a retail background before I got into the 340B space, I know a lot of pharmacists and technicians really feel stagnant or they've gotten to the point that they can't advance any further within the program. So I think that that's somewhere the 340B program is different than a lot of other areas inside of pharmacy.
What about 340B makes it different and gives you those avenues for career advancement? Like, what about it as opposed to just typical retail pharmacy gives you that advancement?
I think it's just the structure of the way pharmacy is set up here in current day that um, there aren't a lot of positions to advance to. You get into a position, you might advance from a staff pharmacist to a pharmacist in charge or a pharmacy manager, but you might have one more step up in your district or region. So it just makes it really challenging. But the I think the difference in 340B is that there are aspects of different areas within your covered entity that come into 340B. It combines so many different things, including finance, operations, clinical aspects, um, as well as others that I think that it just provides opportunities to grow.
I think you just hit on one of the most important pieces that it can take aspects of what interests someone outside of the world of pharmacy and allow them to grow that interest out and build on it to better help the organization within the 340 program, increase the savings, better serve their patients. And I think that when we look at kind of pharmacy career paths in general, as a technician, your options are really going into retail or going into hospital. And then as a pharmacist, if you right out of pharmacy school, you can go right into retail or you can go into a residency, which now has some primary care, ambulatory care options in it or hospital based, but none of them are kind of clinical hospital based. But none of them are really focused on the 340B program. So it's not a place where you're automatically taking that career path. Everybody ends up kind of falling into 340B by accident because of a different interest.
Yeah, I don't know of anyone that went to school with the concept of I'm going to be a 340B specialist. I think one of the really cool things about 340B is that for folks that are self motivated, there's endless opportunities, right? But the caveat is if you don't have that self motivation, I think it can be difficult to advance because there's so much to learn. The vendors all operate differently,
Mhm.
and so I think that's a key thing. Is like if you want to excel in this place, you need to be self motivated because there's not a lot of clear answers, and you have to do a lot of research to figure out what works for your program because you're going to be different than the one next to you.
I don't know about you, but when I was in pharmacy school, I heard the mention of 340B once or twice, but I really didn't know what it was until I was out in the retail space working in a contract pharmacy, and I thought I knew 340B, but I really didn't.
Yeah, I didn't go to pharmacy school, so in accounting we don't talk about 340B.
Yeah, I mean, I never heard of 340B until honestly I was in residency, and like I said, fell into it because I was helping operate a program that was heavily supported by the 340B program, and I had to understand that in order to be able to help run our pharmacy operations.
So, Michael, I think not just from the covered entity perspective, but also from the vendor perspective, um, there are roles for career advancement. So I know we have a different method of bringing our employees up. So what's your kind of theory of career advancement within the company?
Uh, for our company, again, it goes back to that you need to be self motivated. Even though we have a lot of these things outlined from how different vendors operate, and we have a little bit more knowledge from a management perspective than most covered entities are going to have. I still think it goes back to being self motivated, right? Because we have a lot of deliverables. We stay very busy as a team, and we need people that aren't just checking the boxes and doing the steps. So for me, that's a huge thing. But you don't have to be a pharmacist. You don't have to be a pharmacy tech. Even you don't have to have a medical background. 340B is weird, and I think a lot of covered entity management make the assumption that because you're a pharmacist, you know 340B, right? Now I think you stack those two things together, and that's the best you can have is a pharmacist that does know 340B.
hmm
But as you said earlier, you're not learning about it in school. So to assume because someone is a pharmacist that they're going to have this knowledge of 340B, that can get you in trouble if they've not been in a 340B program
hmm
before. So I think it's a really cool aspect of this, though, is that you don't have to have the background to be a 340B expert. And 340B is less, not that it's less, but the compliance metrics on 340B are less about clinical and like, did we prescribe the right drug, right? That's not necessarily the test work. It's more of, it really is more of an auditing feature. Do you know how to audit? Can you come up with creative ways to find things that may not be compliant and help of, make that program efficient in your organization so that you are, testing these things. Everybody wants to be compliant. I don't have a single client that's like, hey, no, we don't care about compliance. It's just, I think the caveat on that is figuring out how to get there, figuring out how to find those issues. And again, that's going to happen. There's not a ton of vendor specific training that I can find online to know, okay, for TPA 1, what reports should I be running? What should I be testing as a health center? And so you have to be self motivated. You have to be willing to ask questions you don't know. And I do that a lot, right? I'm always pinging you guys. Hey, I'm not sure about this. What's your opinion on this? And I think you have to be willing to put yourself out there. And if you're willing to do that, whether that be at a CE, whether that be at a vendor, you just have a great opportunity.
I think if we can build off of that, so you kind of given the perspective of as the individual who wants to be able to specialize or get into 340B, how can you do that? I think one of the challenging things about the 340B program is that it is so niche. There's an endless amount of details you can dig into the weeds on. And for many organizations, it can feel as though once you've kind of made your place within 340B, you don't really have any additional career advancement staying within that organization. So if we can kind of flip the conversation to from a managerial perspective, how do covered entities creatively make career ladders for staff that may have been entry level or pharmacy technician or finance background and they've grown into 340B, but how do you make that a career for them? Or what are we seeing different covered entities do to build a career ladder for those individuals so they don't feel stagnant or stuck?
I think not being tied to a specific degree, and I think health centers do a very good job about that because if you've seen one 340B program, you've seen one 340B program along with one FQHC, you've seen one FQHC. But I think that we wear so many hats inside of an FQHC that we get better about that, and we're open to that idea. But I think one of the best ways I've seen is bringing an idea, and it may not be a big enough idea to fund a whole position, but you can start off small. So you can start off in, for example, if it's a technician that's in a dispensing pharmacy within a covered entity, maybe they want to get involved in the 340B audits, and that may not be a full-time job, depending on the covered entity. So they take it as a part-time position and then slowly grow it and show their worth and show that they're providing a value that then they can make that into a full-time position. And I think that that's true of other positions like a pharmacist. There might not be enough reimbursement as a clinical pharmacist is challenging, just due to the healthcare model. So by using a 340B position, you might be able to um, work 1 day a week as a clinical pharmacist, but then you show that that clinical pharmacy aspect is driving prescriptions into your entity-owned pharmacy, and it's paying for itself in a indirect fashion. So I think there are those opportunities. Just thinking about, it may not be a full job change at once, but it's a stepwise fashion.
And to bring it back from a managerial perspective, I think it starts with management getting a better understanding of the 340B program, right? Because again, it's so niche, it's so gray. There's so many nuanced things that I think they'll hire someone to assist with their 340B program, and then they don't take the time necessarily to understand it themselves. And so they think, okay, we got one person, this program is running, we're purchasing drugs, our patients are getting these medications, it's good to go. And that's not the case. And we have a client that I work with out in Oregon, and once a week, which I'm not saying that you have to do it once a week, but once a week we have a meeting, and we got consultants from our team on the meeting, we have pharmacists from the health center on the meeting. Someone from the C-suite normally joins, someone from the data analytics team normally joins. We have different dashboards, and the coolest thing is we're putting all these heads together to kind of give feedback based on different perspectives and different specialties that they work on. And that program has really become super efficient, and now there's a lot of time involved in that. But even with restrictions going on, we're still running a 340B program that's taking care of our patients. And at this time, they only have contract pharmacy. Now they're working on an in-house pharmacy and going to expand that. But I think it's getting the rest of the team to have buy-in to the 340B program allows management to see that, there's more avenues than just a one 340B coordinator. And I think sometimes we get stuck there as health centers. I just really think that it starts with education, and it doesn't, you don't have to know every detail as management, how this vendor works, how that vendor works, but you got to understand the importance of this program. You got to understand what it means to your patients, and understand that we need to have supporting staff in place and not just one person that does all the things. And so for me, that's the biggest piece from, like, if you're saying from the top down, how do we build this out and build career avenues, is you need to have understanding first, right?
Yeah. I think some of the creative things that I've seen health centers specifically do to kind of grow out, we've had MAs or pharmacy technicians or other frontline staff members that want to grow within the 340B program. Some creative kind of career paths that have come out of it. I've seen prescription assistance technicians who kind of specialize in finding those other avenues of getting medications covered when patients can't afford their medications. We've seen prior authorization and refill technicians or MAs that help get those medications back faster for the patients, that helps support the 340B program, but also helps improve overall patient care. We've seen staff go from managing the 340B program and maybe an in-house pharmacy, so doing the audits there, to then growing into a role where they work with the contract pharmacies and work with different TPAs and different types of data. Instances where we've seen the individuals in the 340B program then move out and help manage the clinic administered drugs in the, out in the clinics themselves, doing the inventory reviews, working with the nursing staff on documentation, making sure that everything is operating the best for the healthcare team and for the patient, but also remaining 340B compliant, kind of being able to grow out through there. Have you
Yeah.
seen some other creative ways that health centers have incorporated
Yeah, I
that?
think in the pharmacist line, something we're seeing now that is, I think is really great as a pharmacist, is seeing pharmacy starting to be added to the C-suite level, either as a chief pharmacy officer or chief operations officer, and we're even seeing a few health centers that have appointed a pharmacist as their CEO. And I think that is somewhere where 340B is a little different than a lot of other programs in the health center, because it is so financial and business focused, it lends itself to, once you grasp that 340B portion, you really understand the business of health centers. And I think that C-suites that have recognized that have valued having a pharmacist on that level.
And I've even seen from our clients, um, there's been situations that I've recognized where, management doesn't have the understanding of 340B. They hired a coordinator and they just kind of said, "Hey, this is your baby now. You figure this out. You get it fine tuned." And I've seen a lot of value come from people controlling their own futures and saying, "Okay, maybe management's not as knowledgeable right now of 340B as they should. I'm going to get them there, right?" And
Yeah.
I think that the important thing on that though is not taking too much up at one time, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone's overwhelmed already. But taking baby steps. Hey, let's train them on what our cash card does. Let's
Yeah.
get management to understand. And you just start taking those chunks. And so what you inevitably do is control your future by saying, "Here's the value in the program. Here's me bringing more value to the program." And then you have the opportunity to say, "Hey, here's something that I can show you if we open up an opportunity to say, hey, now we want to be the 340B director. We still need an analytical person or an auditor to be in here testing claims, but here's all the things I could do in this if I were to come up a level."
Yeah.
And so I think there's the cool thing in 340B is that you don't have to only rely on the fact that management already knows the program.
Yeah.
We have the opportunity to train them. We have an opportunity to do that. And
And sell our skills.
yeah, I mean, essentially, that's what we all do, right?
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
we all need to go to work. We all need a paycheck. And so sell your skills and show, a lot of times they just don't understand the value that you're adding to the program. So keep them informed. Keep them
Yeah.
informed. Let them know the value you bring. If they can see it and recognize it, then I think it's pretty, I don't know that easy is the right word, but
Well, I
it,
don't think
it,
anything in 340B is ever easy, but
it gives you a better
yeah.
chance at,
Yeah.
at advancing somewhere else in the CE specific stuff. But
Yeah.
I think you could roll the same thing on the vendor side. One day, a lot of people end up going vendor route. And if you're asking good questions in your meetings and you're going to conferences and you're talking to people and showing that you're willing to put yourself out there and you're willing to be self-motivated, um, you're a good candidate for that. And from a vendor perspective, a lot of those positions are remote positions. So if that's something that really
Yeah.
interests someone, there's a lot of value there because vendors know I can't just find a 340B expert in my hometown, right? Like
Mhm.
same thing here.
Yeah.
A lot of our consultants are remote because we see those skill sets out there and we say, hey, we need them, but I know they're not going to move to Tennessee. So we're going to set up a remote
No
position.
offense to Tennessee.
No offense to Tennessee. No offense at all.
I think along that line, it's what I've seen a lot of times in the health center space is the pharmacist comes in, they may be the only pharmacist at the entity, or the only person in the 340B program, and along with a technician, if it's in that role, is one of the values I've seen is just volunteering for stuff. At least in an FQHC, you can say, we have a quality meeting once a month. Hey, can I join that? Most of the time, the answer is going to be yes. And you can really develop those positions. And something I did at my health center, because advocacy is a huge love of mine, I just started volunteering to help in those kind of things. And then eventually was, in addition to my roles in the pharmacy realm, I was also our advocacy coordinator. But I think 340B lent itself to that because it was such a big issue when it comes to advocacy. It keeps us running, but I think just being prepared, knowing yourself, knowing what you like, and not being afraid to just ask.
And I'm going to toss in, just because I've been at a hospital out of the three of us, I'm going to toss in some other kind of creative ways that I've seen 340B positions grow within the hospital, because I've seen technicians grown into procurement specialists or purchasers or analysts. And then I've seen, for larger health systems, them grow from a hospital specific analyst or 340B specialist to one that's helping oversee the 340B program for the whole system, and even becoming a trainer at the system level to help train the staff, whether it be technicians or pharmacists at each of the separate hospitals, on how to operate most compliantly within the 340B program. We've also seen things like pharmacy and 340B business managers or business directors that don't necessarily have to come from a pharmacy background. We've seen pharmacy technicians grow into some of those roles. We've seen finance folks grow into, pharmacy and 340B finance directors, even though they don't have that pharmacy background. They've kind of come up through the 340B chain to be able to continue to grow their career, which I think is really cool, particularly for some folks to hear that are feeling like they might be stuck in, they've been pigeonholed in one position because that's all their organization has right now in terms of 340B.
We have a relationship with a pharmacist at a large health system that she started as a pharmacist. She worked in 340B and then realized she had a skill and stepped into pharmacy informatics. And it's so important when you're dealing with accumulators and all the different purchasing nuances of working in a hospital, that it's not a natural progression, but it's one of those unique things that can happen.
Yeah, and I think another unique thing is like I've seen techs become pharmacy directors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And usually you
Yeah.
would think that's just for a pharmacist, and they do an awesome job. They got there because they were
Yeah.
self-motivated. They took a lot of ownership of what they were doing. I've also seen pharmacy directors turn into CEOs because the program is so important to the overall community, to our patients, to the organization itself. But, kind of as we're wrapping this up, one of the things I'd like to kind of pick your brains on are for someone who is newer to 340B or has been in 340B for some time and really wants that opportunity to grow, what are some skills specific to the 340B program that you should focus? Where do we see that value? Where's the value at in the things that you could go and, everything's online now. And though it may not have something for 340B specific, maybe it's, hey, if you learn how to work this spreadsheet and, use this function, you're going to expedite the time in which that takes. And so from your viewpoints, what are skills that you can work on to help yourself advance in the 340B program?
I think my skill would be your elevator speech. 340B is really hard to explain to somebody that doesn't understand it. So use the opportunities in your family and your friend groups to explain what you do. It will get you more comfortable in selling yourself and showing how important your position is in your organization. And it's going to help in multiple areas. It's going to help when you're talking to leadership, when you're talking to your board, but then also talking to legislators and other policymakers in regards to the 340B program.
I have to second that because one of the most proud moments in my marriage was hearing my husband accurately describe what I do in 2 sentences. I was amazed. I was so proud of him. But I think that the thirst and hunger to learn more is really important because I don't think that anybody knows everything there is to know about 340B. There's always more. There is no way to be a master of all within 340B. There's just not. So being thirsty and hungry to keep reaching out and learning more and reading what's out there and hearing from the thought leaders in the space is really important to continue to grow your own knowledge base and understanding. And then you mentioned Excel. I just think a level of comfort in Excel in general is really helpful because there's a lot of data in 340B and a lot of things to sift through. And even if you're not an expert at Excel, being comfortable finding your way around through it, even using some of the AI tools we have today to help you write an equation that you're like, I should be able to do this with data, but I don't know how yet. I wonder if there's a way. Being comfortable enough to kind of mess around and get there, I think is really helpful.
I think that's where I have still a lot to learn is Excel. That's definitely somewhere where I'm trying to grow. It's really important. And I think not being afraid to say, I don't know, but knowing where to go for the answer. So building that network.
Yeah, network super important. That's been important for us as a firm. But piggybacking on like the ownership and just going after it and going to get it, I think a really important thing is you can't think of 340B as just a pharmacy program, right? Because that happens so much. We lock it into it's pharmacy. That's what it
Yeah.
is. And though it is pharmacy, there's so much, you can learn, just kind of a caveat there. The accounting can be fairly difficult.
Yeah.
For one, in-house pharmacies, accounting usually has a difficult time tracking that. and the other contract pharmacies, because there's different models, right?
Yeah.
So you may use vendor one and they're a pay upon dispense or a pay upon 340B eligibility match, and vendor two is pay upon replenishment. And so from the accounting records, that makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot, and my opinion is skewed because I'm an accountant, right? So I see value there, but like learn how to track that and to post. And if you can help your finance team out with that, because I guarantee that that's a struggle that they have,
Yeah.
there's more value for you. So
I mean, even if you think about your quality, compliance, legal, like there's so many other things that play into it that I think that you can grow into 340B from those different, ladders.
yeah, there's so much opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
I'm still learning. We've been doing this for several years now, and have a large network of clients that we work with. But we learn stuff every day, and so I think that's just an important life lesson. Don't stop learning. Always try to learn and excel, and control your own future.